This is chapter 2 of Jekyll and Hyde. It's called The Search for Mr. Hyde. So what happens in this one, having just found out about this strange incident at the door, Utterson now is on a bit of a mission. He's a lawyer, so he's used to being that kind of detective, following paper trails and solving cases. So he goes home and he has a little look at his friend and client's will. That's Dr. Jekyll. And he looks at the will and he sees actually in the small print that all of the money and estate that he has, he's going to give to this Mr. Edward Hyde, and that's when he starts to panic because he thinks that Hyde might be blackmailing him in some way. So he goes and visits another member of their establishment, a kind of little boys' club, and it's Dr. Lanyon. And Lanyon's this kind of red-faced, he's described as a hearty, healthy, dapper, red-faced gentleman here, and he's a classic like doctor in the sense that he's an old school doctor, and he doesn't really like new evolving science. So when he asks about this, he kind of dismisses Utterson and sort of sends him packing. He's never heard of Hyde, and he kind of laughs it off. Anyway, Utterson's on a mission, so he actually goes and hangs out near that door that he heard that story about the girl. And he basically is trying to stalk Hyde, and he sees him and he approaches him, and he immediately doesn't like the look of him, and he describes him as shrinking back with a hissing intake of breath, and he sees that there's something sort of weird about him, the way he looks, and he's pale and dwarfish, and he gets a suspicion that Hyde might be trying to do something dodgy with Dr. Jekyll, especially when Hyde gives Utterson this address where he could be contacted in Soho, almost like he's anticipating Jekyll might not be around much longer, and that when he isn't around any longer, this is where he can get hold of me in order to give me all the money, right? So Utterson's really suspicious of this guy. He thinks he's up to no good. He actually goes round to Jekyll's house at the end of this chapter, and hopefully he's going to see him and ask him about him, but he's not in, and that's important. You need to remember that it just so happens he's not around at the time. And he speaks to his butler, Paul, who's this kind of like safe pair of hands in this world. He's your window into the lower class, I suppose. And he asks him about Hyde, and he says, oh yeah, we're supposed to do as we're told if Hyde asks us. We're all quite scared of him. He's got a key to go anywhere. He's basically as important and as powerful as our master Jekyll. So that's when Utterson's really starting to panic and worry. Okay, so this chapter's really about secrecy and about how things are hidden, not just physically, but also like in documents and paper and stuff. And it's how people might be blackmailed in this world, how you can pull the wool over people's eyes a little bit. And the establishment almost being like a little tight boys club where you can cover up like dirtiness and kind of scandal. And that's really relevant now. I'm not going to get too political, you know, but that's still relevant now, where you have to, where if you've got friends in high places, you can kind of like cover over any evil that you might do. Also the power of money, how you can bend things to be your way, and you can potentially like erase history if you've got enough money to pay someone off. There's also quite an interesting bit in this about how physicality, what you look like, gives like immediate judgments of who you are. So there's lots of description in this chapter. You can see it here on the right hand side. How Hyde is described as having a deformity without any nameable malformation. He had a displeasing smile, there was a flush of anger, he had a hissing intake of breath. All this physical description is almost like trying to make Hyde look like an animal, like subhuman. And it's this, it links with the idea that people really did judge people on what they look like, and if you didn't fit the bill, i.e. you didn't have a nice top hat and a long cane and a nice suit, there was something dodgy about you. And Stevenson's trying to make Hyde appear to be a baddie and different in that world, and he's got this physical deformity. He's pale, which obviously had like and dwarfish, and I think Stevenson probably was looking in the mirror, as I said in previous videos, and seeing himself, because he was really ill at the time when he wrote it, and he thought, well, I feel like a criminal at the moment, or I feel like subhuman, and that's the way that he wants to present Hyde, as almost being unable and unworthy of being in society. Okay, so that's chapter 2. The next one is chapter 3, where we're going to start to learn a little bit more about who Jekyll is. Okay.